Samsung has been our reference soundbar since the release of the Q950A. You know how the old saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So how did Samsung manage to make their new Q990C soundbar so different while keeping things pretty much the same? The Q990C is Samsung's latest 11.1.4 channel Dolby Atmos home theater soundbar system. And the C features a large main bar, 2 Atmos-enabled wireless surround speakers, and a single wireless subwoofer. According to Samsung, the C has 22 total speakers and a total power rating of 656 watts, which is the same as last year's Q990B. The system can play back Dolby Atmos encoded content through its HDMI ARC eARC connection or wirelessly with compatible Samsung TVs. Speaking of Samsung TVs, there's support for Q Symphony, which allows the Q990C to work with your Samsung TV's built-in speakers for a more immersive experience. Of course, you also get Samsung's own SpaceFit Pro Auto Room calibration procedure. The 990C is more than just a surround sound home theater in a box. Thanks to its 2 additional HDMI inputs, the C can do the job of a basic AV receiver, allowing users to connect HDMI-equipped devices like, say, a gaming console or Blu-ray player. Speaking of gaming, unlike most modern AV receivers, the 990C's HDMI inputs are not HDMI 2.1, which means you are limited to 4K 60 signals. That's good enough for movies, but if you are an avid gamer, you already know the limitation that this brings. The lack of 2.1 is a real head-scratcher. And for music, there's Bluetooth, AirPlay 2, Wi-Fi, Spotify Connect, and Tidal, just to name a few features. The 990C can also be integrated with your smart home using Amazon Alexa. For a deeper dive into all of the bells and whistles, there's a link to the bar in the description. Now, whether you're a seasoned pro or a first-time user, setting up the Q990C is pretty straightforward. All you need is a quality high-speed HDMI cable and your TV. We connected our Sony X95L TV to the HDMI ARC eARC input. Place the subwoofer where it sounds best and the surround speaker slightly behind and to the side of your sofa, and boom, you're done. And while you can use the 990C's included remote, downloading the Samsung SmartThings app will make getting your bar sounding its best a lot easier and just way faster. The app gives you access to all of the bar's features and definitely makes manual adjustments an absolute breeze. The 990C launches in its standard sound profile, which is surprisingly good, way better than it was with the 990B and 950A. There's more boost in its low, mid bass and bass starting at around 100 Hz with this profile. There's also a small rise in the mids that delivers good vocal clarity without having to engage any of the dynamic dialogue aids. Where the standard profile starts to fall short is in its room-filling dimension and spaciousness. You can adjust the levels of the side and overhead speakers to achieve a greater sense of scale, and if you really like to tweak more than, say, simple tone controls and level adjustments, the standard profile is the only one that has a multi-band graphic EQ, same as last year's model. The surround sound profile is great if you want a more linear sound across the entire frequency response. Compared to the standard profile, the surround sound profile is fuller top to bottom with virtually no audible gap as you transition from the subwoofer's bass to the mid-range and treble of the bar itself. Plus, you don't have to make any manual adjustments. In this profile, the Samsung sense of scale and seamless surround sound front to back, side to side, and overhead, it's on full display. As good as the surround profile is, Samsung's adaptive sound profile is perfect. Now, I know soundbar customers aren't one to obsess about measurements, but look at this. Look at this. It's almost textbook, especially when it comes to watching movies. You don't necessarily want a ruler flat response. Instead, you want a gentle rise in the bass, a mostly linear mid-range, and a subtle roll-off as you near 20 kilohertz. And that is exactly what Samsung's adaptive profile gives you out of the box. Objectively speaking, without any room EQ or wizardry applied, the Q990C has arguably the best looking frequency response I have ever seen from a soundbar, period. We've tested audiophile speakers that cost thousands that do not look this good. Perhaps the biggest highlight and surprise is the noticeable improvement to the subwoofer. Samsung's wireless subwoofer has always excelled at recreating the kind of deep bass that you can truly feel, but past models could sound just a little boomy. Now, it doesn't just rattle your seat cushions. The subwoofer's improved tuning integrates better with the rest of the system. Bass is still plenty deep, but it is way more tactile and nuanced, especially when it comes to instruments like a double bass or, say, a well-recorded kick drum. Don't get me wrong, you throw on a bonkers action sequence like the final battle in The Flash, and it's going to provide you with enough thrills to piss off the neighbors, but this new tuning proves that the new sub is not just a one-trick pony. And that transition from the sub to the 990C's main bar has almost no audible gap, which makes the two sound more or less as one, especially when you place them relatively close to one another. Vocal ranges like mine sound more natural now rather than chesty due to the past bar's over-reliance upon the sub. The bar has a dedicated center driver, so clarity, it's super clear and present without being forward or shouty. Active voice processing does a phenomenal job enhancing the presence of dialogue or vocals without altering just the overall timbre of the bar, which is what happens if you turn on Samsung's old-fashioned dialogue enhancement inside the app, which I just don't recommend you do. The 990C also has gained noticeable improvements in overall mid-range detail. Watching some of my favorite test sequences in the film Elvis, the 990C, it extracts more detail from a film mix than any of its predecessors. And when it comes to the high frequencies, the Q990C, it's just awesome. Even with its added sense of articulation, the treble wasn't brittle or shouty. It's actually really smooth at most volumes. Now, when you hit volumes and peaks over 100 dB, Samsung's limiters do appear to kick in, which can make the tone of the bar sound a little more lean or treble forward. But again, that's at 100 dB plus peaks. The only real issue I have with the 990C's performance isn't even a sound issue, but a switching one. When moving between different apps or switching movies within the same app, a quick digital snap can be heard from the bar's tweeters. And if you're listening at loud volumes, this can get pretty annoying. But aside from that, I found little fault with the 990C's treble performance. The other shocker, apart from the bass, was how much better the 990C's ATMOS-enabled surround speakers are integrated this time around. Not to say that the 990Bs were bad, with some adjustment, I liked them, but the 990C's surrounds and ATMOS presentation, it's just flawless out of the box. We watched all of the Netflix series Painkiller on the Samsung, and while that subject matter isn't what I would call uplifting, director Peter Berg and his sound team, they just mixed one hell of a show. During the series, more chaotic scenes, sounds didn't just surround us. KRISTI and I, we were in it. Sound cues were placed in true three-dimensional space with such accuracy that more than once both of us jerked our head up or to the side to make sure that we weren't hearing someone outside our door or on our roof. Oh, and one more thing. During our evaluation period, neither of the surround speakers lost connection with the bar. And I mention this because I know this has been a concern for some users in the past, but we had no issues. And well-recorded Atmos music sounded equally as good. The 990C may be one of the better all-in-one solutions I've heard for spatial audio listening. The 990C sounds good with stereo tracks, especially when upmixed to, say, a faux surround sound. But where the bar really shines is when you're listening to native Atmos or spatial audio music, which makes sense. If you are a purist after a more traditional two-channel-like sound or feel, the Sonos Arc with the Sonos Sub is a little bit better.
What did you say?
We know that protecting your personal information matters, which is why we are so excited for today's sponsor, NordVPN. With NordVPN, all of your data stays safe and secure behind a wall of next-generation encryption, and they are always working hard to keep your online activity secure no matter where you log on. With you and your family's privacy safe, you can enjoy even more benefits of NordVPN, like getting access to content that's location restricted. For example, since we moved, one of KRISTI's biggest concerns was missing Texas Longhorn football games. NordVPN has servers everywhere, so we never have to worry about missing a big game. Just change your server and you can cheer your favorite team on from wherever you are, too. You can easily find all types of content that you otherwise wouldn't be able to watch, especially if you check out servers in other countries. So go to nordvpn.com/Andrew Robinson to get a huge discount on a 2-year plan, plus get an additional 4 months free. The deal at nordvpn.com/Andrew Robinson is only around for a short time, and it's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. So check out nordvpn.com/Andrew Robinson, or just click the link in the description to save on your plan today. Now, back to the show. Did you guys hear that? Is that the sound of hell freezing over? It must be, because yes, we finally have the Arc. And while I don't want to spoil anything, I'll say this much. I get why some of you are so passionate about it. It's really, really good, especially if you're coming from a more 2-channel or hi-fi background. When paired with the larger Sonos sub, the ARC's overall tone is not as neutral as the Samsung. It's more weighty and rich in comparison, and as a result, stereo mixes, they just sound a little bit more familiar, at least to me. But as a centerpiece for a home theater system, the Samsung manages to sound more nuanced and more balanced straight out of the box. The Sonos app is slicker and it is easier to use, but you get way more control with the Samsung. When it comes to connection options like the number of HDMI inputs, the ARC is limited to 1. That's all I'm going to say for now. Both are great options, but at half the price, it's impossible to argue with Samsung's value. As for the other soundbar of the moment, the Nakamichi Dragon, I wish I could surprise you again with more exciting news, but I can't. As of this recording, no units have been made available to purchase, and yes, I checked. So until that changes or the brand sends one for review, I guess we'll just all have to wait and see. All of that aside, at nearly $4,000, the Dragon is among the more expensive soundbars currently available. And after a conversation with our friend Caleb at Digital Trends, the Dragon sounds impressive, but certainly not perfect out of the box, and it lacks a number of what I'll call important features. They seem like a big deal to me. If you're looking for a more streamlined, easy-to-use solution, the 990C is where it's at. So I guess the only question left to answer is this. Should existing Samsung Q950A and Q990B owners upgrade to the C? When it comes to the Q990B, with the right adjustments inside the app, I think owners could arrive at a similar sound described here. Since we no longer have the Q990B to test this theory, I am relying solely on my notes and measurements to say that I think it's possible. But going back to the Q950A, one of the reasons we decided to stay with it rather than upgrade to the B was because there wasn't a big enough leap over the existing 950A. Well, forget the 950A, and in our case, the 990B. I believe the 990C is the finest soundbar Samsung has made to date. While they may not have changed much, if any, of the components inside compared to last year, the changes they have made to the tuning of the 990C have resulted in a brand new sound and one that I am here for. Especially where movies are concerned, the 990C isn't just a great soundbar solution. It's a true home theater. So that's enough out of me and what I think of the Samsung Q990C, but before we get out of here, I'm dying to know, you agree with me, don't agree with me?
Well, I'm pretty sure people are still recovering from seeing the ARC, so if they're even able to listen at this point, will be a miracle. But as far as the Samsung goes,
yeah.
I absolutely love this bar.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's 100% better than the Q950A. Mm-hmm. And just going off of memory, I honestly don't recall having the same kind of reaction to the 990B, like when we first put it out, pulled it out of the box and fired it up, that I did with the C. The out-of-the-box performance is really, really impressive.
Yeah.
I love that you don't have to do a lot of fine-tuning to any of the profiles.
Mm-mm.
I want to say that I prefer the standard profile specifically for dialogue clarity.
Okay.
I did feel that at no point did I struggle to hear or understand exactly what anyone was saying in a movie or a TV show within that profile. But they're all pretty good.
Yeah.
But if you are someone like me that struggles a little bit, or you're watching actor mumble speak, or perhaps a show such as the one we were just watching last night, the
Invasion.
The Invasion, which has a lot of British, English accents that are, sometimes a little bit difficult to completely understand what they're saying. Maybe switch it over to standard and see if that doesn't help you in that instance.
Yeah, I would switch it to standard before I would activate the dialogue enhancement. Not the active dialogue, but the old school dialogue enhancement, because that just changes everything to sound more tinny. So I think that's a good pro tip. Like if you're in adaptive or surround sound and you're just like, man, this show just doesn't quite hit for me in terms of dialogue, just pop it in standard.
I really was impressed by the rear surrounds, the little ATMOS speakers. I mean, those those were really, really impressive. And for a home theater, I think that this system is just as good as a lot of traditional setups.
100% agree. 100% agree.
I know if you're a purist, that's going to be difficult for you to accept. But the strides I think these companies are making with soundbar systems, it's so impressive.
Yeah.
And the gap between, individual passive speakers requiring a receiver and all of that. And it's narrowing.
Oh, yeah.
Quite quickly.
Yeah. And I agree. I think if I were on the market with a budget of $2,000 to $3,000 for a basic 5.1, 5.1.2 ATMOS setup that may use upward firing drivers, that sit on top, even if I had my heart set on that at this moment, I would find a way to demo this system to see if I didn't feel that the two were really comparable, if not the Samsung better. The one area, this is going to make people laugh, the one area where I think you would benefit by going with a more traditional setup is actually if you're going to use your home theater setup or individual speaker system for stereo listening. Because in listening to just 2-channel audio, right and left speakers, it is still better with traditional speakers than a soundbar. Soundbar with strict stereo still gets pretty localized. And that's just inherent of the design. Now you can put it in surround. You can take 2 and kind of faux surround it in surround or adaptive, and it does a really good job. It does, but it doesn't quite have that purity that you're going to get from 2 dedicated speakers. So it's kind of funny that I would still advocate for a traditional home theater for stereo listening. But if you're like, oh, I don't want my home theater to play music, the line is so blurry, it's a dot.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, at this point, I think the only thing left to really talk about is potentially other comparisons people might want to hear about. And I know that there's a lot of people that may request, well, what about AMBEO?
The one thing I will say about the AMBEO, though, yes, it is still, going off of memory, still one of the best all-inclusive single-bar solutions, but it is very reliant upon you having, say, parallel walls to maximize the sensation of surroundness. And you're just not going to run into that with the Samsung and its 2 small surround speakers. I know it's a few more boxes, a few more power cords, but it will work in every environment, whereas the AMBEO and even other solo bars like the Panorama 3 from Bowers & Wilkins, even the $8,000 theater from B&O, if you don't expand it with other B&O speakers, is going to be very heavily reliant upon the symmetry of your room for maximum impact.
One other thing people will maybe ask about is the Sony, the HTA9 or whatever it's called, the multiple speakers.
Yes.
That we really, really liked back in Austin.
I am going to say that if you are a Sony TV user, I would still advocate for and do believe that spatially and 360 sound mapping wise, especially when paired with the Sony television, the HTA9 is going to be the better solution for that customer. If you have, say, a Hisense or a TCL or an LG, someone that doesn't, the new 990C, every bit it's equal, in my opinion. Every bit it's equal. Now, I can make an argument in some areas for one over the other, so it really is going to come down to kind of just what do you want? What do you prefer? The Sony is still a little bit more expensive at this point. I think it's a little bit more of an elegant solution, but if you're also one that's like, I want a center speaker, damn it, the Samsung is the solution for you. And if you have a Samsung TV, doesn't matter, it's a newer one. Older ones probably not so much, but if you bought like their new Samsung OLED or whatever, you're really going to want to get the Samsung bar. The wireless ATMOS capability, no HDMI cable between them is what I'm talking about. The better space fit tuning, not to mention Q Symphony. It's game changing, and it really is where you can take something as good as the 990C and just kick it up that extra notch. So that's kind of how I feel.
And just for the record, we had this on our Sony.
Yes.
I didn't feel like I was missing anything.
No,
and I'm
no.
not saying that you're saying that. I'm just clarifying for anybody that's going to say, well, I have a Sony TV. Are you still saying go with something else? And you can totally get the HTA9 and be okay. And it's going to sound great. But if you are interested in this Samsung, like, it's going to be good with your Sony TV as well.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I just, for those of you that maybe remember our 7000 ES receiver review and how when it's paired with the Sony TV, like the menu options change and give you control. That same thing happens with Samsung when paired with a Samsung bar. So if convenience matters, that's why I would advocate for it. But this bar worked perfectly with a Sony TV, which is fantastic news. All right, guys, so that's now our review of Samsung's wonderful Q990C soundbar system. What did you guys think? What do you think of this? The bar and all the hardware is pretty much the same, but all brand new tuning. Does it really make it new, or is it sort of just like is it a half measure? I think it makes the bar way better, and I think for people that aren't too familiar with how to tune bars and whatnot are really going to appreciate the 990C's out of the box, well, perfection. But I'm curious what you guys think. All right. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead and ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links that Kristi's left for you down below, know that that's a great way that you have continued to show your support for this channel and the work that both of us do here. And we thank you all very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile, and that is it for us today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next Sunday with a brand new video.